Good, so we're hitting the hour, so let's actually get started. We have recording ongoing. The video will be in the YouTube channel, in the PnP YouTube channel within 24 hours typically. Probably I will get it there slightly earlier today, earlier this time, we'll see. So welcome everybody. This is the special interest group for general SharePoint development, the client-side object model, PowerShell, and the provisioning. And this is the October 5th edition. From 2017, and this is the first session after Ignite where we're finally engaged, we finally explained and showed a lot of the new announcements. And one of the things what we were promoting already in social media is that today our main topic will be on the site design. So site design is something new which we demonstrated first time and announced first time in Ignite, and we kind of demonstrated that in two different sessions. So we showed that in Son Squire session. Son Squire went through the high-level thinking on that, and then we also demonstrated that in the PnP session, which was more around, okay, how do I hook in my customizations, or how do I automate my provisioning related on site design? So what we wanted to do with this time for this session is to really go through what does it actually mean? What is a site design? How do we configure that? How do you hook in your customizations on that? And what are the options? Now, please do remember that this is a functionality which is not yet available. So this will be available by end of this year, but it's always good to have a preview on what's coming up rather than getting that out of blue. And please remember to mute yourself because we have quite a few people in the call. We should have plenty of time on the Q&A in the end. I'm trying to make that happen this time. So depending on how many questions and how many things we're going to address during the presentation. So anyway, a few miscellaneous announcements. Then we'll walk into the site design capability, kind of explain what it is and how does it actually work. And then I'll do a live demo on how do we actually make that happen. And I still can hear audio sounds, so please mute yourself so we can everybody can more easily listen and see what's actually happening. Good. Now, let's actually get on going on the miscellaneous announcements. So, last week on the SharePoint development side, we did have 4 sessions in Microsoft Ignite, and at least for 2 of these, and yesterday we had a recording available already in YouTube, and 2 of them should be available in YouTube either today or tomorrow. Hopefully we'll get them all available relatively soon. So we had a session around the SharePoint development in Enterprise, what's new, what's coming, and which included the SharePoint development roadmap. I will have that slide actually in my today's session as well, so we can quickly walk through what's actually happening. Then we did have a advancing the SharePoint developer community, the PnP session, which was more around what's happening within the open source area and what are we doing within the PnP, all of the new goodies and new initiatives and open source stuff which you can use within your customizations or within your projects. Then, and that was with me and Irvin. Then we had a session with Luca and Paolo around Let's Build SharePoint, so web parts, extensions, and much more, where we actually showed also how you can access additional craft scopes in your SharePoint customization or SharePoint Framework customization. And that's something which is coming up also later this year. So you as a tenant administrator in Office 365, you can decide that you want to expose additional craft scopes for your customizations so that your the identity of a person will be usable, for example, in a custom web API. That's really the key point. And then building the modern SharePoint experience, best practices from Microsoft for developing with SharePoint Framework. That was originally with Jax and Waldek. Unfortunately, Waldek had to skip Ignite due to miscellaneous reasons, but he prepared that together with Jax, and Jax was on site in Orlando for delivering that. But that recording should be later available today or tomorrow as well. Now, that was just a reminder. We have all of that recorded from last week as well. But obviously we keep on reiterating these things during the special interest groups or the community calls, so you understand what's coming, how does it work, and all of that, and there will be documentation available. Some of the new stuff also, before we go to the actual demos and everything else, is that we have a new platform for all of our SharePoint development documentation, well, majority of them for the time being. So SharePoint documentation has been moved to docs.microsoft.com. So if you go akms sp dev docs or docs.microsoft.com/SharePoint, you will actually land on the new platform. And this is where all of the content, also for example from MSDN, all of the active content from MSDN will be migrated. And that's mainly because MSDN is really super old platform and where people cannot contribute on the content. The docs.microsoft.com is the same platform which ASHA, as an example, is using, and all of the other organizations in Microsoft. And people can also contribute on these articles as easily as well. Just a reminder on that one. Now, this is one slide which I took from Dan Kogan's session from last week. Dan Kogan is my manager, so he's leading our team, which is responsible of creating SharePoint Framework and all of the development experiences in SharePoint. And just to make sure that we kind of cover what has happened, and I slightly modified the slide as well, added a few additional things here. But if we think about what has happened in a SharePoint development within the last, let's say, just shipped section, there's obviously lots of it have happened since within a year. But pretty recently we shipped SharePoint Framework for on-premises, so client-side web parts on a classic basis on SharePoint 2016 platform. So that's a new thing, a new great thing which was available. Easily deploy web parts and extensions across your enterprise. That's a new thing as well. So that's the tenant scope deployment option, which we're going to actually cover today in the demo as well, because we take advantage of that one, how we modify the sites which are coming out of the site design process. Yeoman Generator 1.3, which understands on-premises and cloud, came out last Monday, so that's the new thing. Actually, last night, there's the really latest version of that one came out last night, which is 1.3.2. That had a small bug fix related on React usage in on-premises, which is now fixed and available in the NPM packaging system. SharePoint Framework extensions, major thing, it's now G8. So SharePoint Framework extensions are now generally available across all of the tenants within SharePoint Online. And obviously, they will be also available in the future in on-premises, but not yet on the feature pack 2 for SharePoint 2016. So we did announce SharePoint 2019 in Ignite as well, and obviously we're looking into getting all of the goodies and modern experiences to that SharePoint 2019 platform, which is targeted to go live around mid next year. But we can't promise you exactly what's going to happen within 9 months because, well, 9 months is a relatively long time frame. But we can pretty much assume that SharePoint Framework, it will be available there. SharePoint Web Parts obviously will be available, and all of the modern experiences will be in on-premises as well in SharePoint 2019 version. Now, tenant properties, new thing, I'm not going to deep dive on that one too much. REST API for provisioning communication sites, that went live actually as a documented setup last week as well. There was, however, a small bug on that one, which has been now fixed, but we need to wait for the bug to actually get rolled in the production, and that will unfortunately take a few weeks to get it fully deployed into production. And then we also shipped the modern custom themes. We kind of touched that slightly today. I'm not going to deep dive on it, but there's a documentation already available how to take advantage of them as well. Now, coming soon, Office UI Fabric core support, so that's the styling support for any JavaScript framework, which might be interesting for you. More Microsoft Graph support, so you can actually control what do you want to expose for your customization. So if you want to expose emails and all of that, you can absolutely configure that. Or if you want to expose the third-party web API in a true graph for SharePoint Framework solutions, you can absolutely do that. ALM APIs coming relatively soon. That's one of my babies because I've spec'd that one and working on making that shift now, where we are able to then deploy add-ins or SharePoint Framework solutions using APIs to any of the sites programmatically, and also delete and upgrade and all of the basic operations. Assets included in the deployment packages, interesting topic. So if you have Office 365 CDN enabled within your tenant, you can include images and JavaScript files in the SPPKG package, and we'll actually publish that for you. So you don't have to worry about how do I get my stuff from CDN. All of that is taken care of automatically. Site collection scope app catalog is coming, so you're able to do scoped deployments. So you're able to target your solution to be available only within a subset of site collections or in a one site collection rather than the whole tenant. And then a final topic, which is the main topic of today, is the site design with extensibility options. So these two are the things which we concentrate on today within the following 50 minutes. That was really fast, I know. walkthrough on what has happened. If you go back and have a look on the recordings from last week, we actually go through and explain a lot of these things, what they happened, does it mean. We'll update also the roadmap documentation in the Microsoft Dev documentation relatively soon to give you additional insights on where we are going. The coming soon section, I can't promise the exact timelines for every one of them, but right now it's looking that all of those should be available by end of this year, end of this calendar year, to be super precise. So by Christmas, hopefully we'll get all of those out, and that's a nice Christmas present for those people who are building stuff for SharePoint Online. That's absolutely our objective. Now, let's move on the actual topic of today. So I did quite a lot of promotion on this one in the Twitter and in the social media, so that people, if you are interested in actually seeing this live, we'll walk through how these things actually can be done, and we'll walk through also the demo which we did last week in the Ignite, so you'll understand how it was actually created, what does it mean, what's the bits and pieces, and what's available for you relatively soon. Now, I want to be super clear. This is a preview. This capability is not yet available within your Office 365. So you are unable to do any of this for time being. It will be there whenever we get that on a right stability level, and we'll make sure that it's properly documented. You can actually reuse the functionalities or use the capability in a reliable way. Good. Audio should not be off. What happened? Okay, so it's only Louis who's having some issues. Cool. Good. Kind of a few branding slides, or few, let's say, marketing slides here. These things, obviously, you can do pretty cool stuff already in the SharePoint Online using the communication side. So all of these four kind of quick setups are using communication template and communication site template within the SharePoint Online. But obviously, and you can absolutely configure these, and you can configure the theming, you can configure the logos, you can configure the layouts and everything else. But we also know that you need to be able to customize, not just by using the UI, but also by automatically applying this needed settings for your customizations or for your sites which are getting created within the SharePoint Online. So how do we actually make that happen? So the key points today, what we're going to quickly touch, we're going to touch the theming, because it's kind of hand in hand on the demo as well, but the key topic is the site design. So how do we make sure that I have pre-configurable sites whenever the end user goes and creates a new site within a SharePoint Online? And that's where the site design actually helps. So the theming obviously will take care of the colors and fonts, and it will take care of additional things in the future. We will be expanding what's supported in the theming area in the future as well. But site design is really the thing that when the end user goes and creates a site, using the native capabilities within a SharePoint. So he'll go to the SharePoint landing page, he'll click create, new, selects communication sites or a modern team site. What will actually happen when end user creates the site? Now, what's super cool about this, if you're not aware, and these are super fast, and you'll see that in a demo as well. So we're going to create a new modern team site, and it takes roughly 5 seconds. So the speed of creating everything which is modern, it's super fast comparing the classic experience, which is using still the classic, let's say, modern provisioning pipeline. And you'll see this one in the practice as well. But we've done massive amount of optimizations on this side to make sure that whenever somebody needs a site, it will be actually available within a matter of seconds. Earlier today, as an example, I was testing the REST API for communication sites, the fix, which unfortunately is not yet available publicly, but I was able to create communication sites in 2 seconds. So a new communication site, 2 seconds. That's pretty cool, considering that it's a new site collection. So superb improvements from engineering, from a performance perspective. Now, let's actually concentrate on what does it actually mean. So first of all, let's talk about the theming. A few slides on the theming. So the theme option obviously controls the colors and fonts, like mentioned on the slides as well. So you're able to set what is the main colors and what's the color, let's say, overlay within a site. This is available already in the modern experiences, and you're able to essentially set any of the themes for the sites by selecting the look and feel of the site from the top right corner of the page. Now, you can absolutely add your own theme options here, or you're able to remove any of the out-of-the-box theme options as well. And we do have a PowerShell commandlets and APIs to make this happen. So you're absolutely able to make this happen programmatically, or adding the themes in the catalog programmatically, and adding the themes also using the PowerShell in the catalog. And this is really well documented, and we even have a tool for you to create those themes using our Fabric portal. So if you go to the AKMS SP theme builder, it will actually give you all of the needed coloring definitions to create a custom theme for your site. If you have a look on the documentation, which you have in the docs.microsoft.com, it will actually walk through all of the needed steps to create the theme, and also to make it possible and available within the theming catalog. And after that, the end user can then select the theme for the site. Now, obviously, the reason why we want to have a custom theme is that whenever end user creates a site, we have to be able to set the theme automatically for the site, because we can't really rely on the end user to go and after site creation to then configure stuff manually. That's not going to probably happen, or it is a human error, or they don't care, and that's not really how things should work within a SharePoint. Obviously, whenever you create a site, you should get your Contoso branding or whatever is your branding applied to the site with automatically. And that's where the site designs and site scripts actually come into play. So it's a combination of those things. Site scripts are actually definitions of actions to be applied on a site. Site design is then hooking in which of those scripts are available when the end user goes to that functionality and selects and starts creating a new site to the SharePoint Online. So you, as a developer or a tenant admin, you control what kind of site scripts and site designs will be exposed using the UI. And the site script essentially defines what will happen on top of the out-of-the-box site when the out-of-the-box site has been created. And typical scenarios is that you want to have, for example, the company theming applied, company logo applied, some additional settings applied as well. Now, as part of this one, this is kind of the similar kind of thinking as the, let's say, the SharePoint PnP, the provisioning engine. But because the out-of-the-box site design does not support yet at this point, and let's see when it will support that, all of the capabilities what we have, for example, for PnP provisioning or whatever third-party remote provisioning solution, we need to have an extensibility point. And we do that, and we have that from a day one. So if you need to do something for the newly created site, which is not supported by the native site design or the site actions or the script actions, you can actually call an extension point. And that means that you're able to then take advantage, for example, your existing investments on the PnP provisioning engine. So this will not replace your existing engine necessarily. Again, it really comes down on what are you using right now, how you're using that right now. You can actually easily hook in your existing site provisioning solution, the engine itself, as part of this native flow. And that has been kind of one of our objectives from a day one, because we know that people have been making investments on the site provisioning, for example, the moderns like what we've been promoting in the PnP Partner Pack. And we don't want to take that away and those investments away. But the engine can be still hooked in to the site design, and that's really the thing what I'm going to demonstrate today as well. Now, how does the script actually look like? So how does what's in the side of the site script and in the site design? So how does it actually look like? Now, this is a clarification or a simplification of a one script. I'm going to show one live in a demo as well. But on the left side, let's see if I can actually do some drawing here. Let's see if this actually works. It should work at least for some of you, depending on which platform you are. So let's choose a screen. So in here, we, as an example, this is a section where we do create a list. So we create a list if the list does not exist, called customer tracking. The template type being 100, and that's the list name over there. Within the list, we are adding a description for the list, which is list of customers in order, and then we'll add a field to the list if it does not exist for the time being. The reason why it's always kind of additive is also that you are able to apply these scripts on top of existing sites as well. So these are not just necessarily a provisioning time things. You can absolutely do that later. You can do that in the later on as well. So as an example, you have a new business requirement that for every single site collection, you need to have an additional document library available. You can then choose if you want to use the PnP provisioning engine or if you want to take advantage of the new out-of-the-box capabilities as within the site scripts. Now, there's another action here. You can actually see another JSON action here, which is say apply a theme. And in this case, we're just basically saying that, hey, apply a contours or travel theme to this site, and we're as part of the actions to be applied on the site. And like Ralph is pointing out, it is indeed JSON. JSON is the, well, let's actually not even have jokes on that one. But anyway, so there was a decision done that this one will be implemented using JSON to miscellaneous reasons. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? That's debatable. Now, if you are familiar with the PnP provisioning engine, that actually supports both. So you're able to serialize your stuff in the provisioning schema in XML or in the JSON format. But we do not yet have any conversions between the two systems. So, and we're looking into obviously doing that in the future whenever we have additional more capabilities supported by the out-of-the-box provisioning engine. Now, quickly looking into other options here as well. So what's kind of cool here with the site recipes is that you're able to also target them to be natively available only specifically for people's, for example, in a specific group. So if a user belongs to a specific AD, Azure Active Directory group, he will see then a separate set of actions or separate set of site designs available within the UI. And this is already available from a day one. So you're able to target directly what are those designs which are available for a specific group of people, which makes a lot of sense. So the UI will adapt on these things from that perspective. Yes, where was it? JSON is an XML for hipsters. There it is. Thank you, Irvin. That's exactly what I was looking. Good. Now, what is actually supported from a day one or currently? So right now, the first 4 items is only the supported ones. So creating a list, apply company theme, trigger logic apps, and I'll come back on that one, and activate features. The stuff which is marked with the star is not currently supported, but it's where we're working on that one, or engineering, or our engineers are working on that one based on the work that we've done in the PM side. So these are additional things. Add a site to the navigation, add a declarative formatting to a column, turn site to a hub, if you're familiar with site hubs and all of that. Now, obviously this isn't a massive amount of actions, and we do absolutely acknowledge that, and that's why we actually have the extensibility point. And the extensibility point is this fellow here, if you can see my awesome arrow drawing on the slide as well, in green. There we go, which is the trigger logic app. So our extensibility story for recipes is that you are able to fire in a secured way or start a secured way a Microsoft flow. And what it means is then that you are responsible what actually happens in the flow. So as part of the recipe, when a site is getting created, a flow is getting activated, and then you have pretty much infinite options, because with flow, you can actually do pretty interesting stuff, and I'm going to show you that one in the practice as we move along on the demo as well. But that's essentially our extensibility point. Some of you might be thinking or have been asking the let's say, site-created webhook for a year already. And for now, right now, that is not actually in our radar, because the flow logic app here is taking care of the primary requirement around the site creation, which is I need to be able to execute my code whenever a site is actually created. So we, let's say, in quotes, we piggyback on the flow process, and then you are able to actually do and call your code in a secured way without the requirement of having a webhook. if you followed up on the webhook discussion, which we've been having within the past year. It might be that the webhook is coming at some point. There are certain technical reasons why it has not been yet implemented, and I'm not going to deep dive on that one within this session. But the trigger, the logic app is really the way how we can extend the provisioning logic and also take advantage of the PnP provisioning engine or whatever third-party provisioning engine what we want to use. And that's what I'm going to show you today as well. Oh, there's a good question. Sorry, by the way, I really hard time on watching into all of the questions, but there is a good question from Joel, which we probably want to address here. So, can we save site as a template and get a JSON file in the same way as we could do with PnP? Answer is no. And the reason for that one is that right now, at least, the amount of functions what we support when we get started by end of this year, which again, this is not available right now. You're seeing a preview functionality. Whenever we get started, there's not enough capabilities which we support to be able to save site in quotes as a template. That's why you most likely will still be using a PnP provisioning engine or the PnP PowerShell to do that and save your site as a template and then hook in that one to the native out-of-the-box recipe flow. Or you'll keep on using your existing solution. That's absolutely fine and absolutely supported as well. But let's actually move on slightly so we get to the demo section. Now, I mentioned the key point here is that how do I call my external code? How do I make my provisioning engine, or let's say, how do I take advantage of my PnP provisioning engine or the existing investments on the provisioning area? And how do I do that is by taking advantage of the flow. So end user goes and end user selects and starts creating a site by selecting the site creation from the UI. And that's then triggering, let me click on that one. That's actually instantiating a flow. And then it's up to you. What do we want to do within this flow? So what's going to happen when the flow actually starts? One of the actions which is available within the flow is add a message to the storage queue. And as part of this execution of this flow, you actually get the site URL which was just created. So you can actually bypass that URL to, for example, to a storage queue, which is waiting in the Azure side. And immediately when we add a message on the storage queue, we are actually in Azure. So now we have all the opportunities, whatever we want to do in Azure side. For example, we can activate an ASHA function automatically whenever the message goes into the queue. And in the ASHA function, we can then, for example, take advantage of the PnP provisioning engine. And in there, take advantage of the classic provisioning engine, applying a template on top of the site which was newly created, and voila, we actually have fully functional, fully customizable, and we can modify the experience, what happens on the site in any way we need based on the existing investments, what we've done before this even came live. And obviously at some point, maybe the site recipe will support sufficient amount of actions for you, so you don't actually need to use this extensibility route. And then you'll just modify your existing site design and site script not to call the flow. It will actually use the native capability. We'll see how fast we'll add additional capabilities on the being supported in the site recipe side. Cool. Now, no, I don't see any active questions here. Did they reinvent the wheel? Yes, kind of. The key point of this whole story is that basically, yes, surely you can use this particular flow already today, but right now today, until the site designs capability has been available, you have not been able to take advantage of the out-of-the-box experience of the site creation. You've always had to go to a custom UI, custom experience where you request the site collection and the flow and the process starts from there. And yes, you can do that in the future as well. But if you want to, you can take advantage of the out-of-the-box UIs, and you do not need to implement a custom UI. And that's really the key change from a capability perspective. Now, there's a good question from David on will they provide? David, actually, it's even me. So I'm in the engineering responsible of making this happen. So it's not they, it's us, so to say. But anyway, good question. I'll come back on that one. So how would we be able to ask additional metadata from the end user on these things when we walk through the demo? And we will have time for Q&A in the end. I'm trying to address all of those at that time. Now, classic business case, this is what we're going to do today, and I'm going to explain how did we make this happen in the demo in Ignite, and we'll absolutely have all of these steps documented whenever we go live in preview with the site recipes. So we want to take advantage of out-of-the-box provisioning. We want to use the out-of-the-box experience for creating a site. We want to provision some default libraries and lists. Yeah, that's easily doable. We want to set a custom theme based on a company branding. Yeah, that's easily doable as well. We want to modify the welcome page of the modern site, and that's where it actually starts getting slightly more complicated, and that's already the one requirement which is currently not supported in the preview version of site recipes, or the version which I'm showing you, which again is not yet available for you. We will make sure that you are aware whenever that's available for you. And we also want to add a third-party web part on the site automatically. So whenever the site is actually created, there's a third-party web part waiting on the site for the end user. And we also want to add a SharePoint Framework extension to the site automatically whenever the site is actually created. And we want to do some additional level of logging on the site creation. All of that is relatively typical from a, let's say, process perspective. But again, in the past, you've been forced to use the custom solution to make all of this happen. Yes, for a lot of this, you still need to do use custom engine for the operations, but you can take advantage of the out-of-the-box UI. And again, that's really the key point. Now, and Oliver, good to know. Let's get back on that one. So let's actually move into the demo. So let me walk through a few scenarios here first, and then I'm going to deep dive how these things were actually done. So how did we configure our tenant, and how the configuration will look like, what is the configuration, what are the actions, and all of that. Somebody needs to now confirm that you're able to see what I'm sharing. Seems to be pretty okay. Yes, if Chris got it in the other side of the pond, and Matti got it in here, Philip got it as well. Okay, good to go. Cool. So this is just a random site, and I'm going to actually you can already see here that this is not a typical Office 365 tenant, because this actually have the new app launcher, which is coming out relatively soon. My personal note on this one, thank God we're bringing back the colors so I can find where the SharePoint is, because I've been always having a hard time finding the SharePoint in the whole gray area on the left side. But anyway, so selecting the SharePoint, and we're going to land on the SharePoint welcome page. Big change on the colors, absolutely agree on that. And I'm going to create a site. So I'm going to create a site. Let's walk through the end user scenarios first, and then have a look on how did we make this happen from a functionality perspective. So I'm going to create a theme site. I'm going to actually choose a slightly simplistic scenario first, and then we'll get back on the complex PnP provisioning scenario. So custom site design, let's call this Seattle March trip. And that name is still available, good. And let's actually create a site. 1, 2, 3. Oh, that was 3. That was fast. Okay. So site is now ready. If I click finish, you can actually see the new thing happening right now. So this is where we actually see the site recipe, the site design being activated on the right side. And the progress is in here. The site is being updated with additional components and settings because we selected a specific template for within the selection. And by the way, the fact that this one failed, it's absolutely fine. It doesn't matter for the demo. In this particular case, the site design actually contained one definition from creating a customer tracking list. It also created a campaign event list, and then it was trying to trigger a flow, which for reasons or another failed. I'm not going to actually address on that one because we have another one which works. And then it actually applied a custom theme. So now if I click finish, we can actually see that the change within the site is, well, pretty obvious. We applied a custom theme. Site is now branded based on the business requirements of my whatever the business requirements for the branding is. Well, that's a massive deal. Well, even though Ralph is already applying, which is good, and this is good progress from a, let's say, overall automation perspective, no doubt. Now, where it actually gets interesting is that there's typically, customers have also additional requirements. They actually want to have, let's say, third-party web parts. They want to have SharePoint Framework extensions. They want to have other stuff on this side as well. So how do we make that one happen? So let's actually go back on the SharePoint side. Yes, the colors are so awesome. And create a site. And let's create a new theme site. Let's actually select now the Contoso Travel Focus project. And like mentioned, I'm going to show you guys ins and outs of what is this and how is it configured in a second as well. But this is one of the site designs which are now being exposed. Behind of this site design, there's a site script, which is defining those actions which are getting to be activated whenever the end user creates a site based on this. So you can set your default site design. So if you don't select anything, there's a default site design being selected. You can define that in a tenant level as well. And in this case, we're going to use the Contoso Travel Focus project. So let's actually use that one. Let's call this Seattle December. And let's actually create a site based on that. And again, behind of that selection, we're doing something extra. So the site is getting created. 1, 2, okay, that was super fast again. I'm going to click finish, and we can actually say the site script being then activated and getting started on the flow, getting started on executing stuff. In this case, we actually also create 2 lists, and then we trigger a flow, and we apply a custom theme. But the flow triggering is actually, like mentioned in the slides, this is our extensibility point. This is where we can actually do whatever we want. And let me go to this flow, which was actually getting started. So if I go to manage my flows, and in this case we have flow, I'm acting as a Melissa, due to various reasons, I'm Melissa Torres. But this is a flow which is actually getting started. And if I go to edit flow, and extend what do we actually have in this flow. We have an HTTP request action, and this is actually which is an endpoint in flow which is getting called, and it is getting the web URL of the site which was just created. So that's essentially the extensibility point. SharePoint server calls in the server side or inside of the data center, inside of the servers. It calls internally that HTTP address, which is hosted in our data centers as well. And it provides the web URL, which was the site which is just created. As part of that, then it's up to us what do we want to do with that. So in this case, we do add a new item to a site. In this case, this was just added here, for example, for reasons that we are able to do some level of a governance. So if I jump on that site, and let's actually go to that site, and it's called list name is a site directory. Oop. And if I go coming here, we can actually see in the site contents that we have a site directory list, where we are actually storing all of the sites which are getting created within my tenant. It's just an extensibility point. Again, do you want to do this? Well, it's up to you. It depends on what do you want to use. What do you want to do within your flow? Now, coming back on the flow, that's fine. Okay, we're creating an item to that list. Yeah, okay, that's cool. I'm not going to save this one. But the final thing is actually the most interesting thing. Let's hide that one, and let's hide that one. So what we have in this flow is an add a message to the storage queue. So we configured a secret for our storage queue, a storage account in Azure. We're configured a queue name, which is in this case demo SG, and within that queue, we're adding the URL, which was or the site URL to the site which was just created. And again, in a secret way, because it is using the storage key, storage account secure permission model, so the secret key, to actually get that message in into the storage queue. And at this point, we are kind of outside of SharePoint Online. We are in Azure world, and that's super, super cool, because immediately when we get the message outside of the SharePoint to the Azure, it's up to us what we want to do. So in this case, from a demo perspective, it is relatively simple thing. So we do have an ASHA function waiting in the Azure side, which has been configured to fire whenever there's a new message waiting within that particular queue. So whenever the SharePoint Online, we create a site, the URL of that site is added to the storage queue. The storage queue is then essentially initiating this ASHA function. In the ASHA function, let's see what are we doing here. We are getting the trigger input as the URL, which was just created. We connect to that URL using the app-only access, and we are applying a one PnP template on top of the site. And that's being quite nice. We have 2 lines of code essentially to modify the site because we're taking advantage of the PnP provisioning engine. I'll come back on a second on all of this, how all of this is being configured and actually created, so we'll go through that one as well. But now if I go back on the site, let me close the flow. Let's not actually say. So you want to leave this page? Yes, I want to leave the page. Cool. If I go back on my Seattle December site, if I now click finish, we'll do a refresh on the site, and voila, we have a completely custom UI and the welcome page, which is saying welcome to Contoso team site. And we have a custom theme applied. We have a welcome text there. We have a custom web part, which is pointing now to the Orange County Convention Center. We have a third-party web part here. And we also have a SharePoint Framework extension. And SharePoint Framework extension, as an example, which is the footer here, you don't really see that well, but you can see it when I'm actually moving across the site. Because it's a SharePoint Framework extension associated on the site level, it doesn't really matter where I'm actually located within the site. The SharePoint Framework extension is getting rendered as well. And there we go. Without any automation, without, let's say, additional complexity, and taking advantage of the PnP together with site designs, we're able to have this fully customized welcome page and fully customized site with third-party web part and extensions being applied on the site as well. Yes, thank you, Rolf. Yay! This is when we got pretty big applause in the Ignite as well. Now, let's actually slightly go through what's happening here. So at this point, I'm going to take like 10 minutes to quickly explain how did we make all of this happening, and now how can you make pretty much the same thing immediately when the site recipe is out, or how can you already today modify the modern sites based on your business requirements using the PnP provisioning engine. Okay. So let's move first on the site recipe model. So let's actually have a look on that one. So here's our custom site design. This is just a, let me actually put that one in a slightly more readable format. Let's get rid of that and let's actually flip to Markdown editor. So that's pretty much readable. So this is just the JavaScript which we actually use to create the site design. Whenever we go live at stage 1, we will have PowerShells and we will have APIs to actually make this happen. But technically what we have done here is that we have a site design which is defined in JSON format. We're creating a list, we're creating another list and all of that. The interesting part here, that's the other list which was created. The interesting part here is, however, the flow trigger. In the flow trigger, we're essentially saying, hey, SharePoint, whenever somebody creates a site, please do fire that particular endpoint. And this is essentially HTTP flow trigger to activate the flow. And that's, how did I get that URL? Well, if I go back on my flow, when I created the flow, if I go back on my flow side, we actually have the URL in here. So there's a when HTTP request is received. So now if I take that URL and actually do a quick notepad comparison. So there's that URL, and if I get back in here, you can see that it's exactly the same URL. So basically what we're saying for SharePoint is that within our recipe, whenever a site is getting created, fire that endpoint, and in the flow side, we then are defining that we are expecting a web URL coming in, which we can then use within our flow. And that's essentially then making the URL available in here. Cool. Now, that's my site script, but how did I actually get that site script available within a site? And this is something which might be slightly changed before we go live, but this is quickly again the actual, let me hide that one and hide that one and hide that one and hide that one. So this is where we actually say that we have a Contoso travel site design, and the Contoso travel site design actually has that site script behind it. That's the unique GUID of the script which is just so. So essentially, you can actually say that when somebody selects one design, you apply multiple scripts. That's absolutely possible as well, because that's a collection of recipes, or, well, at least now it's called recipe GUIDs, but let's see if we change that term before we go live. And what we do here is that we're saying that this recipe is only available for the web template 64. And that's a key interesting point as well, which I didn't show because I forgot to show that. You're able to target these recipes based on the template type or the site template site. So in this case, we say 64 because that's the modern group site web template ID. 68 would be the communication site ID. So if I go back on my SharePoint site quickly, let's have a look on that. If I go back in here to SharePoint from a selection, and click create a site, there we go. And if I choose a team site, we can see that we have 3 selections. If I choose a communication site, we actually have different set of selections available. So you're able to target your site designs based on the type of the site which is getting selected. And obviously, site designs are supported with the communication sites as well. So that's how we basically got. This is how we got our site scripts and site design available within the UI. And in the UI, we fired our flow using the URL-based action. So in here, we got the web URL, and in here, we basically just created a flow action, which is put a message in a storage queue, which is dropping then the web URL to the queue called the demo SG. How does that then fire the PowerShell on the other side? So let's actually go to the ASHA side, and let's create a new function. So I can actually quickly create a new function and show you how it's actually done. For example, using the PowerShell, it really doesn't matter what is your preference. So let me create a new function. In my Ignite Functions application, I'm creating a new function. So there's quite a few of these options available. How is that function getting activated? In our case, because we wanted to use PowerShell just for my demo purposes, it is underneath the experimental, and I can actually choose the PowerShell in here, so we can see that. So there's a queue trigger PowerShell, which essentially means whenever a message is dropped on the storage queue, my PowerShell will be executed. So, and the only thing what I need to do is essentially create that one in my storage, and there we go. Whenever a message is getting activated in the storage queue, and we can even test this. I can run it, and what we're actually getting is that we're getting PowerShell script process queue message, PowerShell process queue message, sample queue data. So we're able to even do testing and debugging in the function, or just as well, I could actually open up that this script in my own local box and write the PowerShell script, and then just adapt that on this side as well. So in our PowerShell script, in the actual PowerShell script, what did we do? We connected back on the SharePoint Online using app ID and app secret. So I've obviously registered an app ID and a secret with the tenant permissions, because I need to be able to connect to a random site collection which didn't exist until we actually get that as a parameter in here. So therefore, I need to have a tenant level permissions within my app to be able to connect back on the SharePoint to that specific URL, which is giving us a parameter. And then we are using the PnP provisioning engine, quite simply apply a PnP provisioning template, and that is just the URL or the location of the template. But what's on the template? So how did we make the SharePoint Framework solutions and the web parts and extensions to be automatically available within the site? And let's have a look on that one still. So first of all, we needed to make sure that in our tenant, within our tenant, we have the needed applications available. So obviously, what we've done here is that we deployed the needed SharePoint Framework solutions available in the app catalog. So these are waiting in the app catalog. And the key point here is that we configured these two solutions, the extension solution and a web part, to be tenant scoped deployable. So if I open up my Visual Studio Code, not that one, actually, yes, that one. And let's actually flip back on looking code. Let's flip on Monokai. This is a good example. So this is the SharePoint Framework extension which is saw within a site. And this is nothing more than a simple application customizer which is outputting a text Contoso confidential powered by Microsoft SharePoint Online. Super simple stuff. But the trick here is that when we created this solution, we actually said that it's a tenant scoped deployable solution, which is actually setting the skip feature deployment equals true. And what it means is that that SharePoint Framework extension will be automatically available within sites. It doesn't actually activate that extension in the sites, but it's available for the sites without the solution being explicitly installed on a site level. If we are talking about the web parts, if you're actually creating a web part and you set this one, skip feature deployment equals true, it means that as long as the web part is in the app catalog, it is actually available in a UI. So people are able to use the web part. So the web part scenario, the web parts are automatically available within a tenant level as long as you get this attribute equals true. In the extension case, that's not true. So we're not activating extensions randomly across all of the tenants because those actually might have, let's say, much more significant impact in the UI. In this case, this extension, let me jump on back of the on the extension side or the site. Here we go. This extension is only a footer here, so it doesn't really have a significant, let's say, experience or significant impact from an end user perspective, but it might. And it might be that in some sites you are going to have a different extensions and different configurations. And that's precisely why we do not support the extension to be deployed all of the sites automatically and activated all of the sites within your tenant, because that's not really the typical scenario. You want to make sure that the extension, specific extensions are being activated on specific sites. But how do we make that happen? So how did we make that happen that the extensions are actually visible within a site? And that's where we used the PnP provisioning engine. So if I actually open up our template, let's close all of those so they're not actually causing any challenges. This is the actual template which the PnP PowerShell applied in the ASHA function. And in here, you can see that we are using or creating client pages. We override the home.aspx. There's an override setting is true. We have a welcome to Contoso team site text web part here. We have a Bing web part here. There's a custom web part over there. If we scroll on this side, we can see that it's a custom web part with that particular ID. And that's essentially telling SharePoint that, hey, there's a web part, and we can assume that there's a web part in the app catalog with that specific ID. If the web part wouldn't be there, it just doesn't render anything on that location. But on the extension case, if you scroll slightly down, let me actually scroll these away. The extensions which we saw as a footer, we associated that as a custom action to the site using, again, the client-side component ID here. And if you would like to, in this case, we don't actually do that, but there is a client-side component properties, which you could take advantage as well. Client-side component properties, which you could use to parameterize that instance. So in this case, for example, we might say property, I'm actually not doing the proper format, but that's fine. Footer text A, and for a different selection or a different template, we might be saying slightly different footer text, or we might render something different in the footer or in the header or in the whatever the functionality is actually doing. And that's really how we automate the extensions to be available within the site, also as part of the site design process and the remote provisioning. And that's super, super cool. Cool. So this is essentially the template and the trick. How did we got, well, it's not a trick, it is just a clever design. How did we got the site to look like exactly what it is from this site perspective? Now we have 6 minutes. I know that Bert has been actively helping on the questions and probably some other ones as well. But if there's super active questions which I haven't covered and you want me to show still something for the video recording or whatever, just let me know. Yes, so the ASHA function call, we're talking about the permissions. So in here, I'm calling back using an app ID and an app secret. So it is using app-only access to call back on a SharePoint Online. Because the PnP PowerShell supports that, and obviously you can use CSM or REST supports app-only access back to that side as well. So the operation in the ASHA function does not need to have explicitly permissions, because this doesn't. You stop sharing. Yes, I'm sharing. Yes. So this obvious ASHA function doesn't have an identity which the SharePoint Online would understand. Therefore, we need to use app only to modify the site. The modern sites are actually, well, the web template ID is 64 or 68. It's slightly debatable is it group has 0 or how do we call that? So that would mean that we would call a URL of a function or the logic app directly as well. And well, in this case, you cannot actually call this function directly because this is based on an ASHA storage queue. Yes, you could actually call this ASHA function by adding a message to the queue, but there's no URL to activate this ASHA function because we created a type of where the trigger action was actually adding a message to the queue. That's really the key difference here. ASHA functions doesn't need to have an REST endpoint to make them happen. And that's basically if somebody is wondering on the permissions, so coming back in here, so the flow is getting activated by the server in our data center. That URL is getting activated by SharePoint Online in our data center as well, so that's secured. Plus there's quite a big level of obfuscation here as well for that one. Putting the message on storage queue is using the storage account secrets. So you need to know the secret, which is essentially a password. In here, there's no exposed endpoints for this ASHA function because we didn't actually set that. We created a ASHA function which was a type of, so let me do that once again, PowerShell, and we selected queue trigger. That's now the trick. We do not actually do HTTP trigger, and that means that we do not have an endpoint available and exposed. That's how it works. Can I enrich? Yes, good. Somebody remembered to come back on that question. Now, if an end user, if we need to have additional metadata being requested for the site creation, we can, right now at least, there's no way for modifying this out-of-the-box form. And that's an ongoing discussion, and maybe at some point there might be, maybe I will see. Right now, if you need to do that, within this design, what it would mean is that whenever the site is getting fully provisioned, so let's go back on our Seattle December, we could at this point, our extension could, for example, open a right level panel and ask that metadata as a modal dialog from the end user. That's how I would actually implement that. So we'd be able to get additional metadata for the site. Theoretically, you could build something on the flow as well, but now the flow starts after the site is getting created. That's the problem. The site does exist at that point already. I would try to make sure that whenever the user comes first time on the site, we need to have the metadata stored at some point. We'll do a modal dialog here, and we'll make sure that end user is requesting or setting those permissions. Does a site action script support action for modifying ACLs and creating SP group principles? Well, the site action script doesn't do that. But again, in your external application, like in this case in ASHA function, you can absolutely do modifications on the groups and on all of that stuff. But that would require that you have an extensibility bound. PnP provisioning engine absolutely supports that. You can modify ACLs and all of those permissions. So it's super easily doable. Is it possible to apply a recipe if the site is created via REST API? It is, yes. There will be an API to apply a recipe on the site as well. Absolutely. Speaking of panel, will we get a well-known panel placeholder in extensions? That is an ongoing question. I think there's a new user action in the user voice around that. So if you need to have a panel placeholder, please go and vote. There is a relatively new panel placeholder request in the user voice with 27 votes. If this one will get additional votes, absolutely, we will make that happen. Yes, good work, Sandra. that's pretty decent that you got 27 votes within less than 2 days. It's slightly more than a day old. 29 now. Yes, thank you, Kevin. Cool. Technically, even though you wouldn't have that placeholder, you can still start a panel on the site. So you can still make that happen, but the placeholder would make that easier, no doubt. Cool. Did I miss any other questions? Probably not. And we do know that there's a lot of additional questions. We didn't cover everything in a way that you're able to repeat this probably whenever we get live on this one. That's not actually the intention of this call. The intention of this call was really to open you and show you how did we make this demo happen in Ignite and what is our plans related on site designs and how things will be working. All of the things what I for example showed around the configurations and creation of a design, all of this stuff might slightly still be adjusted. So this is not a production ready stuff, and it doesn't match most likely what will be shipped within a few weeks. But the key point is to understand how to make this happen, how to understand the flow, understand what's actually happening within here. Can we create a modern communication site, team site as a tenant root site? Not for the time being, unfortunately. I know that there's a user voice entry on that one as well, but that's not currently possible. Only it's SharePoint using ASHA AD app. Yes, but you need a certificate. Yep, that works as well. Now we're run out of time. We're 1 minute of the time. I know that there's probably a lot of questions. Have a look on the video. Have a look on our Ignite stuff. Go to the go to the tech community for any additional questions. PnP community. So let me actually get in here. We in the SharePoint dev, probably a good way to have a discussion, or alternatively, if this isn't working for you, you can always go to SP Dev Docs. And in the SP Dev Docs, we have, this is our main location to report any bugs issues for the engineering as well. All of this is getting replicated to our Visual Studio Online, and we have dedicated engineers watching if there's any issues, which we should jump into. So good place to have a discussion also with other people who might be interested in our topic. But good, I think that's it for this one. Slightly ran out of time because I was talking too much, but hopefully it's beneficial. You understand now our thinking around the site designs and site scripts and how to extend that flow in the future. We'll get all of this stuff absolutely documented. You can follow up on tutorial step-by-step guidance. You are able to do exactly what I did today. That will be available then whenever the site designs will be truly available for you in preview. But thank you everybody for your input. Thank you everybody for joining today, and the video recording will be available in YouTube, like mentioned, within 24 hours. Thank you. Bye-bye.